Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Foundation. Douglas Hanson had built his life on two principles: protect those you love and never leave a job unfinished. At 42, he'd spent 15 years as a criminal psychologist for the district attorney's office before transitioning to private consulting work 3 years ago. The change gave him more time with his family, his wife Ruth, their 6-year-old son Samuel, and the quiet suburban life they'd carved out in Chester County. Doug's office sat in the converted attic of their colonial home, walls lined with case files and psychology texts. His reputation for breaking through the minds of criminals had made him invaluable during trials, his testimony often the turning point that sent predators away for decades. He'd helped convict 63 offenders, each one a monster he'd pulled apart psychologically until juries saw them for what they truly were. Ruth worked as a nurse at Chester Memorial, her steady compassion balancing Doug's analytical intensity. They'd met during a case 12 years ago when he was evaluating a suspect in the ER. She'd been the one to notice Doug hadn't eaten in 20 hours, bringing him coffee and a sandwich while he worked. 6 months later, they were married. Doug's sister Laura lived 20 minutes away in Brandywine. A single mother since her divorce 3 years ago, she raised her 12-year-old daughter Stephanie with fierce independence. Laura taught English at the local middle school, her artistic nature a stark contrast to Doug's calculated precision. Despite their differences, they'd remain close, Sunday dinners at Doug's house a sacred tradition. The consulting work had been good to Doug. He'd built a client base of law firms and police departments across 3 states, his insights helping them understand criminal behavior patterns. The money was better than his DA's salary, and the flexibility meant he could coach Samuel's soccer team and actually be present for his family. But the past had a way of resurfacing. Doug kept detailed files on every case he'd worked, every criminal he'd helped convict. Some sent letters from prison, threats, pleas, rambling manifestos. He'd learned to recognize the truly dangerous ones, the individuals whose hatred burned with focused intensity rather than scattered rage. Those files stayed in a locked cabinet, a catalog of enemies who might one day come calling. 3 weeks ago, Doug had noticed something odd. A friend request on Laura's Facebook from someone claiming to be a parent at Stephanie's school. Then a similar request on Ruth's account. Both profiles seemed legitimate at first glance. Local, mutual friends, normal posting history. But Doug's instincts prickled. The photos looked slightly off, the posting patterns too regular, too calculated. He'd run the profiles through software he developed for identifying fake accounts. The results were inconclusive, but his gut told him something was wrong. He'd mentioned it to Ruth, who dismissed it as professional paranoia. "Not everyone is a criminal mastermind, Doug," she'd said gently. "Sometimes people are just people." He'd almost convinced himself she was right. Almost. Chapter 2. The evening begins. The call came on a Thursday evening in late September. Laura's voice carried an edge of exhaustion. "Doug, I hate to ask, but I'm drowning here. Parent-teacher conferences ran late, and I've got 3 essays to grade for tomorrow. Any chance you could watch Stephanie tonight?" "Of course," Doug said, Samuel already tugging at his sleeve with excitement. His son adored his older cousin, following her around like a devoted puppy whenever they were together. "Bring her over. Ruth's working a double shift, so it's just us anyway." Laura arrived 30 minutes later, Stephanie trailing behind with her backpack and phone clutched in her hand. The girl had grown 3 inches over the summer, all awkward limbs and self-consciousness. Her blonde hair hung in front of her face like a curtain, and she barely made eye contact when Doug hugged her hello. "You okay, Steph?" Doug asked, noting the tension in her shoulders. "Fine," she mumbled, the universal teenage response that meant anything but. Laura kissed her daughter's forehead. "I'll be back by 10. "Thanks again, Doug. You're a lifesaver." She paused at the door. "Oh, and she's been on that phone constantly. Might want to limit screen time." After Laura left, Doug set up the kids with pizza in the living room. Samuel immediately launched into a detailed explanation of his latest Lego creation, while Stephanie picked at her food, her eyes drifting to her phone every few seconds. "Big plans online tonight?" Doug asked, keeping his tone light. Stephanie's head snapped up, color flooding her cheeks. "What? No, just friends." The micro-expression lasted less than a second, fear flickering across her features before being suppressed. Doug's professional instincts activated instantly. That wasn't normal teenage defensiveness. That was the look of someone hiding something significant. "Steph, if something's going on." "Nothing's going on." She stood abruptly. "Can I go to the bathroom?" Doug watched her flee upstairs, phone clutched tightly in her hand. Samuel looked up from his pizza. "Stephanie's acting weird, Dad." "Yeah, buddy. She is." For the next hour, Doug tried to engage both kids in a board game, but Stephanie remained distracted, jumping every time her phone buzzed. She excused herself twice more, each time returning with red-rimmed eyes and a forced smile. At 8 o'clock, Samuel challenged Stephanie to a race in the backyard. Doug watched from the kitchen window as his son darted between trees, laughing wildly. Stephanie followed more slowly, and Doug saw her pause by the fence, pulling out her phone again. The way she held it, angled away, shoulders hunched protectively, sent alarm bells ringing in Doug's head. He'd seen that posture before, in interrogation rooms and victim interviews. That was the stance of someone protecting a dangerous secret. When they came back inside, Stephanie asked to use Doug's laptop for homework. Samuel, hyped up from running, begged his father to play video games in the den. As they set up the console, Doug's phone buzzed. "Ruth, checking in from work. How's everything?" "Fine, but something's off with Stephanie," he texted back. "Off how?" "Not sure yet. Call you later." Chapter 3. The Truth Revealed. The scream came from upstairs. Doug bolted from the den, taking stairs 3 at a time. Samuel sprinted behind him, small feet pounding on wood. "Dad! Dad!" They found Stephanie in the hallway bathroom, her phone lying face up on the sink. Samuel reached it first, his 6-year-old curiosity faster than Doug's caution. "Dad, look at her phone." The moment Doug saw the screen, the world tilted. His blood turned to ice, and he couldn't breathe. The image displayed was a photograph of Stephanie, recent, taken in her bedroom based on the background. But it was the text messages that made his vision tunnel. "You look beautiful in this one. Send me another like we talked about. Remember, this is our secret. Don't tell your mom or uncle. If you don't send what I asked for, everyone will see the photos you already sent." Doug's hands shook as he scrolled up, seeing weeks of messages. Grooming, manipulation, coercion. Whoever was behind this had been working on Stephanie for over a month, slowly building trust before making demands. The profile name was Mark Stevens, but Doug knew it was fake. Then he scrolled further, and his heart stopped completely. Buried in the conversation was a single line that changed everything. "Your uncle took everything from me. Now I'm taking everything from him." Stephanie started crying, her thin frame shaking with sobs. "The truth is, I thought he was real. He said he was 16, that he went to Brandywine High. He knew things about me, about our family. He said he liked me, that I was special." Her voice cracked. Then he started asking for pictures. And when I said no, he said he'd send the ones I already sent to everyone at school, to Mom, to you. Samuel clutched Doug's leg, not understanding, but sensing the terror in the room. Doug's mind raced through possibilities, connecting dots with terrifying speed. The fake Facebook profiles, the timing, the personal information this person had about their family. This wasn't random. This was targeted. This was revenge. "Who did you tell?" Doug asked, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. "No one. He said if I told anyone, he'd destroy everything." He said, her voice broke completely. "He said he'd hurt Samuel. He sent me a picture of Samuel at soccer practice last week." The professional mask Doug had maintained for 15 years cracked. Someone had threatened his son, had stalked his family, had victimized his niece as part of some elaborate revenge scheme. He pulled Stephanie into a hug, feeling her tears soak his shirt. "Listen to me carefully. You did nothing wrong. This person is a predator, and he's going to prison. But I need you to tell me everything. Every detail you remember." Doug called Ruth immediately. She answered on the first ring, and he could hear the alarm in his own voice as he explained. "Call the police. Right now. And then get home. Ruth didn't hesitate. I'm calling from a nurse's station. They'll be there in minutes. Doug sat both kids on the couch. Stephanie still crying, Samuel confused and scared. He examined the phone more carefully, his training kicking in. The messages showed sophistication, VPN usage, encrypted apps, multiple layers of anonymity. This wasn't some amateur predator. This was someone who knew what they were doing. But they'd made one mistake. In their arrogance, they'd revealed their motive. This was about Doug, about revenge, which meant it was someone from his past, someone he'd helped convict or expose. As sirens wailed in the distance, Doug began mentally cataloging every case, every enemy. The list was long, but the skill set required to pull this off narrowed it considerably. Whoever this was had resources, technical knowledge, and a deep personal grudge. 2 police cars arrived within 5 minutes, followed by Ruth's Honda screeching into the driveway. Detective Brian Atkins, someone Doug had worked with dozens of times, led the response team. Doug, Atkins said grimly, pulling on latex gloves to handle the phone. Ruth said this involves Stephanie. It involves all of us, Doug replied, his voice hard as stone. This isn't random, Brian. Someone from my past is using my niece to get to me. As Atkins examined the phone and began coordinating with the cybercrimes unit, Ruth wrapped her arms around both children. Laura arrived minutes later, having been called by Ruth, her face white with horror as she learned what had happened to her daughter. Doug stood apart, his mind already working through the puzzle. He'd spent 15 years hunting monsters. Now one was hunting him, but they'd made a critical error. They'd revealed themselves too soon, before completing whatever endgame they'd planned. And Douglas Hanson never left a job unfinished. Chapter 4. The Investigation. The Hanson house transformed into a command center overnight. Detective Atkins set up in Doug's home office. Cybercrimes specialist Johanna Sprague hunched over multiple laptops, and a victim's advocate spoke softly with Stephanie in the living room. Laura sat beside her daughter, gripping her hand like a lifeline. The single mother's usual confidence had shattered, replaced by raw guilt. How did I miss this? I'm her mother. I should have seen something. Ruth squeezed Laura's shoulder. These predators are professionals. They know how to hide. Doug stood at the window, watching dawn break over the neighborhood. He hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. His mind was running through 15 years of cases, cataloging enemies who might have the capability and motive for this kind of revenge. Atkins emerged from the office, exhaustion etched on his face. The accounts sophisticated. Multiple VPN layers, disposable email, burner payment method for the messaging app. Sprague says whoever set this up knows their way around digital forensics. That narrows it down, Doug said. Most of the people I helped convict were street-level criminals or crime bosses. Only a handful had serious technical skills. Make a list. Atkins handed him a legal pad. Everyone who might want revenge and has the know-how to pull this off. Doug sat at the kitchen table, pen hovering over paper. The obvious suspects emerged first. Trevor Barr, a hacker he'd profiled during a cyberstalking case. Marcus Chun, a tech entrepreneur who'd used his company to run an identity theft ring. Vincent Cole, a former IT security expert turned blackmailer. But something nagged at Doug's memory. The phrasing in that message, "Your uncle took everything from me," that suggested total destruction, complete loss. Most of his cases resulted in prison time, but only a few had led to total ruin. Sprague found something. Atkins called out, "You need to see this." In the office, Johanna pointed to her screen. The predator got sloppy. One of the photos he sent Stephanie, the one supposedly proving he was at Brandywire High, has metadata that wasn't fully scrubbed. It's from 5 years ago, taken in Delaware County. Doug leaned closer, studying the image. A high school hallway, generic enough to seem convincing. But Johanna was right. The timestamp was wrong, the location wrong. "Can you triangulate where in Delaware County?" Doug asked. "Working on it. The GPS coordinates were partially corrupted, but I can narrow it down to maybe a 3-mile radius." Johanna's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Give me an hour." Doug returned to his list, this time adding notes about each suspect's location and current status. Trevor Barr was still in federal prison in Ohio, scratched off. Marcus Chun had been deported to Taiwan after serving his sentence. Unlikely. Vincent Cole had died in a prison fight 2 years ago. Definitely not him. That left the deeper cuts, cases that hadn't made headlines but had destroyed lives completely. Doug closed his eyes, forcing himself back through the memories. Then it hit him, the Proctor case. 7 years ago, Doug had been called in to evaluate Richard Proctor, a computer science teacher at a private school in Delaware County. Proctor had been accused of inappropriate relationships with students, but he'd been clever, leaving no direct evidence. The school board was ready to dismiss the allegations as student fabrications. Doug had spent 3 days with Proctor conducting psychological evaluations. He'd recognized the signs, the narcissism masked as charisma, the boundary violations disguised as mentorship, the predatory patience. Doug's testimony had been damning. He'd outlined exactly how Proctor groomed his victims, the psychological patterns that marked him as a dangerous predator. The DA had used Doug's profile to get a warrant for Proctor's computers. They'd found everything: hidden cameras in his classroom, encrypted files of student photos, chat logs spanning years. Proctor had been sentenced to 25 years. His wife had divorced him. His 2 children had changed their names. His entire life had imploded. Took everything from him. Atkins, Doug called out, urgency sharpening his voice. Pull the files on Richard Proctor. Convicted 7 years ago on multiple counts of child exploitation. Atkins was already typing. Richard Proctor, showing he's incarcerated at SCI Phoenix. Check if he's actually there. Now, 10 minutes later, Atkins's face went pale. He was transferred to a minimum security facility 6 months ago for good behavior. And 3 weeks ago, he walked away from a work release program. There's an active warrant, but he's in the wind. The timeline matched perfectly. The Facebook friend request had started 3 weeks ago. The grooming of Stephanie had begun right after Proctor's escape. Johanna looked up from her computer. About a hit on that location. The photo metadata narrows to an area near Chester, specifically around the old industrial park on Route 352. Doug's blood ran cold. That's 2 miles from here. He's been close this whole time. Ruth had been listening from the doorway. Doug, if he escaped 3 weeks ago and has been watching us, stalking Stephanie, what was his endgame? Doug's mind raced through the psychology of revenge, the escalation patterns of predators. He wanted to hurt me the way I hurt him, destroy my family from the inside out. Stephanie was just the beginning. He'd planned to expose the photos, ruin her reputation, tear Laura apart with guilt, then probably go after Samuel next. Jesus, Atkins muttered. But we found out too soon, Doug continued, the pieces falling into place. He'd barely started phase 1 when Stephanie broke down. He's not done. He's going to escalate now that his plan's blown. As if on cue, Doug's phone buzzed. An unknown number. A text message with a single photo attachment. It was Samuel, taken through their living room window. Taken within the last hour, judging by the morning light. The accompanying message was simple. Your turn to lose everything. Chapter 5. The hunter becomes hunted. He's watching us right now. Doug said, his voice eerily calm despite the rage coursing through his veins. He showed the phone to Atkins, who immediately barked orders into his radio. Within minutes, patrol units began sweeping the neighborhood. Atkins ordered everyone away from windows while tactical units established a perimeter. But Doug knew it was futile. Proctor had been 3 steps ahead this entire time. He wouldn't be caught sitting in a car with binoculars. Ruth pulled Samuel close, her nurse's composure finally cracking. How was this happening? How does he keep getting near us? Doug studied the photo again, analyzing angles and distances. The shot was taken from across the street, probably from the abandoned Kellerman house that had been on the market for 6 months. High ground, good sight lines, easy escape routes through the backwoods. He's not just watching, Doug said. He studied us. Our routines, our blind spots, our vulnerabilities. He spent weeks planning this. Johanna was already working her magic on the new photo. No metadata this time. He learned from his mistake. But the image quality suggests a decent camera, probably telephoto lens. And look here, She zoomed in on a reflection in the window. That's a vehicle. Dark-colored. Possibly a van or SUV. Laura emerged from the living room, having finally gotten Stephanie to sleep with medication from Ruth's emergency kit. Doug, what do we do? How do we stop him? The question hung in the air. Traditional law enforcement was reactive. Wait for the predator to make a move, then respond. But Proctor had already proven he could slip through police nets. He'd been evading capture for 3 weeks, while orchestrating an elaborate revenge plot. Doug made a decision that went against every professional instinct he developed. I'm going to draw him out. Absolutely not, Atkins said immediately. You're not bait, Doug. We'll increase patrols, put your family in protective custody, and he'll wait. He's patient. You read his file. He spent years grooming victims before making a move. He'll disappear, regroup, and come back when we've lowered our guard. Doug's eyes were hard. No, we end this now. Ruth grabbed his arm. Doug, this man is dangerous. He's already proven he'll target children to get to you, which is exactly why I need to give him a better target. Me. The psychology was clear in Doug's mind. Proctor's entire revenge plot was built on a foundation of narcissistic injury. Doug had exposed him, destroyed his carefully constructed facade, taken away everything he valued. The predator's ego demanded that Doug suffer similarly, watching his family destroyed before his own fall. But that same ego was Proctor's weakness. He couldn't resist the opportunity to confront Doug directly, to gloat, to prove his superiority over the man who'd unmasked him. Here's what he doesn't know, Doug continued. I've been studying him for 7 years. I wrote a 60-page psychological profile on Richard Proctor. I know how he thinks, what drives him, what he can't resist. Atkins frowned. What are you proposing? I'm proposing we feed him exactly what his ego needs. A chance to confront me, to prove he's smarter, to make me watch my world burn before finishing me off. Doug pulled out his laptop. Johanna, can you trace where that photo was sent from? It bounced through 3 cell towers. Best I can do is a general area, Eastern Chester, couple square miles. That's enough. Doug opened a map. He needs a base of operations. Somewhere isolated enough for privacy, but close enough to surveil us. And it has to tie back to his past somehow. Predators like him can't resist symbolic connections. Laura looked over his shoulder. What kind of place are we looking for? Doug's fingers traced possible locations on the map. 7 years ago, before his arrest, Proctor lived in Concord Township with his family. His wife got the house in the divorce. But he owned other property, a cabin he'd inherited from his father, somewhere he used to take students for extra tutoring. We checked his known properties. Atkins protested. All clear. Check property records under his father's name. Stanley Proctor. Johanna was already typing. Stanley Proctor, deceased 12 years ago, owned a small property on here. She turned the screen. Chester Springs, rural area off Yellow Springs Road. Property never transferred after Stanley's death, still listed under his name in tax records. Doug felt the pieces clicking into place. That's it. That's where he is. Even if you're right, Atkins said, we can't just storm in. We need to surveil, get confirmation, build a tactical plan. We don't have time. Every hour we wait, he's planning his next move against Samuel or Stephanie. Doug stood, his decision made. So we give him what he wants. I'll reach out, arrange a meeting. Make him think he's won. Ruth shook her head. This is insane. You're not trained for this kind of operation, Doug. You're a psychologist, not an action hero. I'm the man who destroyed his life, Doug countered. I'm the only person he wants to face. And I'm the only one who can get into his head deeply enough to end this. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the plan's implications. Finally, Atkins spoke. If we do this, and if it's on my terms, you wear a wire, tactical team stages nearby, and at the first sign of trouble, we breach. Clear. Doug nodded. Clear. Now here's how we make him believe he's in control. Chapter 6, Setting the Trap. Doug sat alone in his office, staring at the burner phone Atkins had provided. The plan was risky, some would say reckless, but it was the only way to end this before Proctor hurt someone else. Downstairs, tactical teams were preparing. Ruth had taken Samuel and Stephanie to Laura's house with protective detail. The fewer people in the potential blast radius, the better. Doug dialed the number that had sent the threatening photo. It rang 4 times before connecting. Dr. Hansen. Richard Proctor's voice was smooth, cultured, exactly as Doug remembered from the interrogations 7 years ago. I wondered how long it would take you to figure it out. Not long enough for you to finish whatever you're planning, Richard. A low chuckle. Oh, I've finished plenty. Your niece is traumatized. Your sister is drowning in guilt. Your wife is terrified for your son. I've already taken quite a lot from you. Doug forced his voice to remain steady. But it's not enough, is it? You don't just want them to suffer. You want me to know you beat me. You want to prove you're smarter. Silence on the other end. Then, you think you understand me. I wrote the book on you, Richard. Literally. That profile I created? It's used in training at Quantico now. You're a textbook case of narcissistic predatory behavior masked by superficial charm. Your need for validation is pathological. You can't help yourself. Is that so? The voice had an edge now, ego bristling at the clinical assessment. You spent years building a false image as the caring teacher, the mentor. I stripped it away in 3 days. Showed everyone the monster underneath. And you can't let that stand. Your entire revenge plot isn't about justice. It's about ego restoration. You destroyed my life. Proctor's composure cracked slightly. My children won't speak to me. My colleagues think I'm a monster. I lost everything because you decided to play God. No, Richard, you lost everything because you are a monster. I just made sure everyone else could see it. A long pause. Doug could practically hear the internal struggle. Rage versus the need to appear in control. Here's what's going to happen, Proctor finally said. You're going to come to me. Alone. Unarmed. Or I make good on my promise regarding your son. I've been inside your house twice this week while you were all sleeping. Imagine how easy it would be to take him. The threat made Doug's blood boil, but he kept his voice level. Where? You know where? The place where you first destroyed my life. Where you interviewed me, picked apart my brain, turned my words into weapons. Doug's mind raced. The initial interview had been at the Chester County Justice Center, but that didn't fit. Too public, too secure. Then he remembered the second interview, the one where Proctor had finally cracked. It had been at the school, in Proctor's own classroom, surrounded by the evidence of his crimes. But the school had been demolished 4 years ago. The old Whitmore Academy property, Doug said. Smart as ever, Doctor. The construction on the new building doesn't start until spring. Plenty of privacy. Midnight tonight. Come alone. Or I start sending pieces of your life to the media. Those photos of Stephanie would make quite a headline. The line went dead. Doug immediately turned to Atkins, who'd been listening through an earpiece. He's escalating faster than I expected. We need to move up the timeline. Whitmore Academy closed 4 years ago, Atkins confirmed, looking at his tablet. Property's been vacant, pending redevelopment. 3 buildings still standing, mostly gutted. Plenty of places to hide. Johanna looked up from her equipment. I can have drones in the air by sundown. Thermal imaging to locate him. We'll know exactly where he is before you go in. No, Doug said. They'll be watching for drones, for surveillance. This man's been planning this for weeks. He'll have countermeasures. Luis McGraw, head of the tactical unit, stepped forward. Then we go in heavy. Full breach, multiple entry points. Take him by surprise. And risk him having a dead man's switch. Doug shook his head. Someone this calculated will have fail-safes. If we storm in and he's killed, those photos of Stephanie could auto-release. We need to control the situation. So what's your play? Atkins asked. Doug pulled up the building schematics on his laptop. The old academy had 3 structures. The main building where classrooms had been, an auditorium, and the gymnasium. The main building was where Proctor's classroom had been located. He'll want the classroom, Doug said. Maximum symbolic impact. That's where I broke him down, where his facade crumbled. He needs to reverse that moment. How can you be sure? McGraw asked. Because that's what his ego demands. He's not just killing me. He's rewriting history in his mind. Creating a new narrative where he's in control, where he wins. Doug traced possible approaches on the schematic. Here's the plan. I go in through the front entrance, obvious and expected. He'll feel in control. While he's focused on me, your team enters through the basement access here. He pointed to the gymnasium's old locker room entrance. These old schools all had connected tunnel systems for heating and maintenance. Risky, McGraw said. If he hears us, you're exposed. That's why you wait for my signal. I keep him talking, get him a monologue about his grand plan. You know his ego won't let him resist. Once I've established his exact location and confirmed he doesn't have hostages or fail-safes, I give the signal. Atkins frowned. What signal? Doug pulled out the case file from 7 years ago, flipping to a specific page. During the interrogation, there was one phrase that made him lose control completely. When I accused him of being forgettable, just another predator without anything unique or special about his methods. It broke through his narcissistic defense. He raged for 20 minutes. So you insult him and hope he doesn't shoot you? Ruth had appeared in the doorway, having returned from settling the kids. I know exactly how to push his buttons, Doug said. I've been inside his head. I know what breaks him. Ruth crossed the room, gripping Doug's shoulders. This is insane. You're going to confront a dangerous predator who spent weeks planning your murder. I'm going to end this, Doug corrected. On my terms. He thinks he's in control, that he's orchestrated this perfect revenge. But the moment he agreed to meet me, he lost. Because now we know where he'll be, and he's given me exactly the opening I need. Atkins checked his watch. It's 3 p.m. We've got 9 hours to prepare. Doug, you need a rest. Get your head right for this. I'll rest when Proctor's in custody and my family's safe. The rest of the afternoon was spent in preparation. McGraw's team memorized the building layout, planned entry points, rehearsed breach procedures. Johanna equipped Doug with a near-invisible wire, the microphone so small it looked like a mole on his neck. As night fell, Ruth pulled Doug aside. Promise me something, anything. Promise me you're not doing this because you feel guilty, because you think this is somehow your fault for putting him away. Doug took her hands. Richard Proctor made his choices long before I ever met him. I'm doing this because I'm the only one who can, because I have a skill set that makes me uniquely qualified to end this threat, and because no one threatens my family without consequences. She kissed him hard. Then go end it. But come back to us. At 11:30 p.m., Doug drove his own car toward the old Whitmore Academy property. Behind him, invisible in the darkness, tactical units mobilized. Overhead, despite his objections, a high-altitude drone tracked his movement. Atkins had insisted on at least that much backup. The abandoned school loomed against the night sky, windows dark and empty like dead eyes. Doug parked in the old faculty lot, the same spot where he'd parked 7 years ago before the interview that had destroyed Richard Proctor's life. He stepped out into the cool October air and walked toward his destiny. Chapter 7. Face to Face. The main entrance hung open, the doors long since stripped of locks and hardware. Doug stepped into the darkness, his footsteps echoing in the empty lobby. Emergency lighting cast everything in shades of gray and shadow. Punctual as ever, Dr. Hansen. Proctor's voice drifted from somewhere deeper in the building. Doug moved forward, following the voice. The hallways were stripped bare, lockers removed, wall decorations torn away. Only the classroom numbers remained, painted ghosts of the school's former life. Room 237, Proctor's old classroom. Doug entered slowly. The room had been gutted, but the layout remained the same. Proctor stood at the front where his desk had once been, silhouetted against the windows. He'd aged poorly in prison, gaunt, hair prematurely gray, eyes holding a feverish intensity. Do you know what prison does to someone like me? Proctor asked conversationally. A teacher, someone who worked with children? They have a special kind of hell for us inside. You made your choices, Richard. No. Proctor's composure slipped immediately. You made choices for me. You twisted my words, my actions, made me into some kind of monster. Doug remained calm, edging slightly to his right, giving the tactical team a better angle when they breached. I simply told the truth. You groomed children. You exploited their trust. You're a predator. I never touched them. Not like they said. I care about those students. I was mentoring them. You took pictures of them. Hundreds of pictures stored in encrypted folders. You manipulated them emotionally, isolated them from other support systems, created dependency. That's the textbook definition of grooming. Richard. Proctor pulled a gun from his waistband, a revolver, Doug noted, probably untraceable. You don't get to analyze me anymore. Tonight, I'm the one in control. Are you? Doug took another careful step. Because from where I stand, you've spent 7 years obsessing over me. You've orchestrated this elaborate revenge plot, but all it proves is that I'm still in your head. I still control you. Shut up. You could have disappeared after escaping, started a new life somewhere. But you couldn't, could you? Your ego wouldn't allow it. You had to come back, had to prove something to me. That's the ultimate validation-seeking behavior. Proctor's hand shook, the gun wavering. I'm going to take everything from you, just like you took everything from me. You've taken nothing. Stephanie will recover. She's strong, like her mother. My son is safe. My family is intact. All you've done is prove my original assessment correct. You're predictable, Richard. Forgettable. Just another narcissistic predator without an original thought in your head. The trigger word hit its mark. Proctor's face contorted with rage. The same expression Doug remembered from that interrogation room 7 years ago. Forgettable? Forgettable. I've been playing you like a puppet for weeks. Have you? Or have you done exactly what I knew you'd do? Come to this specific room, in this specific building, at this specific time, because your damaged ego demanded it. I wrote your playbook, Richard. You're just following the script. I'm going to kill you. Proctor advanced, gun raised. No, you're not. Because that's not enough for you. You don't just want me dead. You want me to acknowledge your superiority first. You want validation that you outsmarted me. That's why you haven't pulled the trigger yet. Proctor stopped, confusion flickering across his features. You think you're so smart. I think you're broken, Doug interrupted. I think 7 years in prison didn't rehabilitate you. It just refined your obsession. I think you're incapable of moving past this because your entire identity was built on being the respected teacher, the trusted mentor. When that image shattered, you shattered with it. Shut up. Make me, Richard. Pull the trigger. But we both know you won't. Not until you've monologued about your brilliant plan. Not until you've tried to make me understand how clever you've been. Because that's what you need. Glass exploded inward as tactical teams breached through the windows. McGraw's unit poured through the door Doug had entered. Red laser sights painted Proctor's chest. But in that moment of distraction, Proctor did the unexpected. He grabbed Doug, putting the gun to his head. Nobody moves. Proctor screamed, backing toward the corner with Doug as a shield. I'll kill him. I'll do it. McGraw's voice was steady. Richard Proctor released the hostage. There's no escape. There doesn't need to be. Proctor's breath was hot against Doug's ear. I just need him to understand. I need him to know that I won. That I broke into his house, I got close to his family. I could have taken everything. Doug remained perfectly still, his mind calculating angles and opportunities. But you didn't, Richard, because you couldn't. Your ego needed this confrontation more than it needed revenge. That's your fatal flaw. You always need an audience. I said shut up. The gun pressed harder against Doug's temple. You wanted to be special, Doug continued, his voice eerily calm. You wanted to be remembered as the one who outsmarted Douglas Hanson. But you know what you'll actually be remembered as? A failure. A predator who couldn't even execute his revenge properly. In 50 years, you'll be a footnote in a textbook, subject displayed typical narcissistic patterns, ultimately leading to his capture. I'll be remembered for killing you. No, Richard, you'll be remembered for nothing. The psychological warfare hit its mark. Proctor's grip loosened for just a fraction of a second. Rage, overwhelming tactical thinking. Doug had been waiting for exactly that moment, the instant when emotion overrode reason. He dropped his weight suddenly, twisting away from the gun. The revolver discharged, the bullet going wide. McGraw's team moved instantly, 2 officers tackling Proctor to the ground while a third kicked the gun away. Doug rolled clear, breathing hard, as the tactical team secured Proctor in restraints. The predator was screaming incoherently, all facade of control completely shattered. Atkins entered the room, surveying the scene. Jesus, Doug, you cut that close. Had to push him to the breaking point, Doug replied, standing up. His ego was the weapon I needed to use against him. Proctor was dragged to his feet, still ranting. You don't understand. I had all planned. I would have destroyed you. You're boring me already, Doug said, turning away dismissively. The final psychological blow, denying Proctor even the satisfaction of Doug's attention. As officers led Proctor away, Doug's phone rang. Ruth's number. He answered immediately. It's done, he said simply. It's over. Her sob of relief was audible even over the commotion. Come home. Please just come home. On my way. Chapter 8. The Aftermath. The Chester County Courthouse was packed 3 months later for Richard Proctor's sentencing hearing. Doug sat in the gallery between Ruth and Laura, Stephanie having chosen to stay home. She wasn't ready to face her tormentor again, and no one blamed her. The case had been airtight. Proctor's phone contained everything. The grooming messages, surveillance photos of the Hanson family, detailed plans for escalating attacks. The Chester County DA, Doris Cook, had prosecuted with ruthless efficiency. But it was Doug's testimony that had sealed Proctor's fate. Over 2 days on the stand, he'd methodically detailed the psychological profile of the defendant, explaining to the jury exactly how Proctor's mind worked, how he'd planned each step of his revenge, and how he'd manipulated Stephanie as part of an elaborate punishment scheme. The jury had deliberated for less than 3 hours. Judge Frederick Watkins looked down at Proctor from the bench. Mr. Proctor, you've been found guilty on 14 counts including attempted murder, child exploitation, cyberstalking, terroristic threats, and escape from custody. Before I pronounce sentence, do you have anything to say? Proctor stood, his attorney beside him. He looked diminished, the prison jumpsuit hanging loose on his frame. Your Honor, Dr. Hanson destroyed my life based on lies and manipulation. Everything I did was in response to. Sit down, Judge Watkins said sharply. I've read Dr. Hanson's original profile from your first conviction. I've reviewed the evidence in this case. The only person who destroyed your life, Mr. Proctor, is you. The judge consulted his notes. Your original crimes were heinous enough, exploiting your position of trust to victimize students. But what you did to the Hanson family, particularly to a 12-year-old girl, demonstrates you are incapable of rehabilitation. You are a danger to society, particularly to children, and you will remain so for the rest of your natural life. He looked up. On count 1, attempted first-degree murder, I sentence you to life in prison without possibility of parole. On counts 2 through 14, sentences ranging from 10 to 25 years to run consecutively. You will spend the rest of your life in a maximum security facility, and I pray you never see freedom again. The gavel fell with finality. As they led Proctor away, he caught Doug's eye one last time. The rage was still there, burning impotently behind bars. Doug held his gaze, expressionless, then deliberately turned away, the same dismissal he'd delivered that night in the abandoned school. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but Doug had prepared a brief statement. Richard Proctor targeted my family because I helped expose his crimes 7 years ago. His conviction today proves that predators cannot hide and that justice, though sometimes delayed, will ultimately prevail. My family and I are grateful to the Chester County Police Department, the District Attorney's Office, and everyone who worked tirelessly to ensure this dangerous individual was brought to justice. He refused to take questions, instead walking to where Ruth, Laura, and Stephanie waited by the car. His niece had come after all, wanting to see justice served. How do you feel? Laura asked her daughter. Stephanie considered the question carefully. I feel like he doesn't have power over me anymore. Uncle Doug showed me that predators are just broken people. They're not special. They're not powerful. They're just sad. Doug felt pride swell in his chest. That's exactly right, Steph. And you're going to be fine. You're stronger than you know. That evening, the family gathered at Doug's house. Ruth, Samuel, Laura, Stephanie, and a few close friends who'd supported them through the ordeal. It wasn't quite a celebration. The trauma was too fresh for that. But it was a recognition that they'd survived, that they'd won. Samuel, oblivious to most of the adult complexities, played with his Legos in the corner. Stephanie sat with Ruth, the two of them looking at colleges. Stephanie had decided she wanted to study psychology, wanted to understand predatory behavior and help other victims. Laura pulled Doug aside on the back porch. "I never thanked you properly. For saving her. For catching him before he could do worse." "You don't need to thank me," Doug said. "She's family. And family protects each other. Still, what you did, facing him alone like that was incredibly brave. And incredibly stupid." Doug laughed, the tension of the past 3 months finally releasing. "Calculated risk. I knew I could get in his head. Because you're smarter than him." "No," Doug corrected. "Because I understand what drives people like him. That's not intelligence. That's just pattern recognition." Proctor was smart, but he was broken, and his brokenness made him predictable. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the suburban neighborhood. Everything looked normal, peaceful, safe. But Doug knew better now. Monsters could lurk anywhere, could strike from unexpected angles. Vigilance wasn't paranoia, it was survival. Ruth joined them on the porch, sliding her arm around Doug's waist. "Samuel wants to know if you'll help him finish his Lego castle before bed." "Absolutely." Doug kissed her forehead. "I'll be right there." As Ruth went back inside, Doug took one last look at the peaceful evening. Somewhere in a maximum security prison, Richard Proctor was beginning his life sentence. The predator was caged. The family was safe. And Douglas Hanson could finally rest, knowing he'd finished the job. Chapter 9. New Beginnings. 6 months later, Doug stood in his renovated home office, now featuring a state-of-the-art security system and reinforced locks on every window. The paranoia had faded, but the precautions remained. Some lessons, once learned, couldn't be unlearned. His consulting business had exploded after the trial. Law enforcement agencies across the country wanted the psychologist who'd outsmarted a predator intent on revenge. Doug was selective about cases now, turning down anything that required extensive travel or time away from his family. Samuel burst into the office, now 7 years old and full of energy. "Dad, Aunt Laura's here with Stephanie. Can we go to the park?" "Absolutely, buddy. Let me grab my keys." Downstairs, Laura and Stephanie waited in the kitchen with Ruth. Stephanie had grown taller, her blonde hair cut short in a style that made her look older, more confident. Therapy had helped, but time and family support had been the real healers. "Uncle Doug," Stephanie said, pulling out her phone, a new one with parental controls and monitoring software. "I wanted to show you something." She pulled up an essay she'd written for her high school English class. The title read, "How My Uncle Taught Me That Predators Aren't Monsters, They're Just Broken People." Doug read through it, emotions welling up. She'd written about her experience with brutal honesty, about the manipulation and fear, but also about how Doug's psychological approach had helped her understand she wasn't at fault. The essay concluded with her decision to study psychology in college, to help other victims understand their trauma. "This is incredible, Steph," Doug said, pulling her into a hug. "Ms. Martinez wants to submit it to a national competition. I told her I needed your permission since it talks about the case. You have it. I'm proud of you for turning something terrible into something meaningful." At the park, Doug pushed Samuel on the swings while Ruth and Laura caught up on a nearby bench. Stephanie sat on the grass, earbuds in, working on homework. Everything was beautifully, wonderfully normal. Doug's phone buzzed. "Detective Atkins." He almost didn't answer, then thought better of it. "Doug, got something I thought you'd want to know. We've been monitoring Proctor's prison communications, standard procedure for high-profile predators. He tried to reach out to 2 other inmates, both with computer skills, trying to coordinate some kind of continued harassment campaign against your family." Doug's jaw tightened, and prison officials caught it immediately. Proctor's been moved to administrative segregation, 23-hour lockdown, no computer privileges ever. "He's done, Doug. He can't hurt anyone anymore. Thanks for letting me know, Brian. There's something else. The FBI wants to consult with you on a case. Another predator using sophisticated technical methods. They specifically requested you after reading about the Proctor case." Doug watched Samuel laugh and shout from the swings, watched his wife smile at her sister, watched his niece study peacefully. He thought about the 63 predators he'd helped convict before Proctor and the countless others still out there. "Tell them I'll take the case," Doug said, but it has to be on my terms. No extended travel. All consultations remote unless absolutely necessary. And my family's security is non-negotiable. I'll pass it along. You know, Doug, what you did, taking on Proctor like that, it's inspired a lot of people in law enforcement. You showed that you don't need a badge or a gun to stop these monsters. You just need to understand them better than they understand themselves. After hanging up, Doug returned to his family. Ruth caught his eye, reading his expression. Work. Potential case. FBI wants a consultation. Are you going to take it? Doug considered the question. He thought about Richard Proctor rotting in a cell, obsessing over the revenge he'd failed to achieve. He thought about the other predators out there, the ones who believed they were untouchable, who thought their intelligence or planning made them invincible. Yeah, he said finally. I am. Because this is what I do. I understand monsters so that families like ours don't have to fear them. Ruth squeezed his hand. Just promise me one thing. No more confronting escaped predators in abandoned buildings. Doug laughed. Deal. From now on, all my monster hunting happened from behind a desk. That night, after Samuel was asleep and Ruth had gone to bed, Doug sat in his office reviewing the materials Atkins had sent over about the FBI case. Another predator, another puzzle to solve. But this time, he had something he hadn't had before. Personal proof that his methods worked, that his understanding of criminal psychology could protect the people he loved. He opened his locked cabinet, pulling out the Proctor file one last time. Inside was his original 60-page profile from 7 years ago, annotated now with notes from the recent case. He'd been right about Proctor from the start. The narcissism, the need for validation, the predictable escalation patterns. Doug added a final note to the file. Subject's downfall confirmed original assessment. Narcissistic predators are ultimately their own worst enemies. Their ego demands recognition, which inevitably leads to capture. Recommend using this case study for future training. He closed the file, locked it away, and turned off the lights. Tomorrow would bring new cases, new challenges, new monsters to understand and defeat. But tonight, his family was safe, justice had been served, and the predator who'd threatened everything Doug loved was caged forever. Douglas Hanson, the man who'd built his life on protecting those he loved and never leaving a job unfinished, could finally close this chapter. The job was done, the monster was defeated, and the family was whole. And somewhere in a maximum security cell, Richard Proctor stared at blank walls. His grand revenge plan, nothing more than a case study in failure. A footnote in Douglas Hanson's growing legend as the psychologist who could outwit any predator. The hunter had become the hunted. The predator had become the prey. And justice, as Doug had always believed, had ultimately prevailed. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Fall. Hunter Allen had always prided himself on reading people. 20 years in construction management, building his company from nothing, had taught him to spot lies, deceit, and weakness from a mile away. But as he watched his 4-year-old son, Charlie, writhing in pain on the emergency room gurney, Hunter realized he'd been blind to the most important deception of all. How did this happen again? Dr. Kevin Houston asked, his experienced hands carefully examining Charlie's twisted arm. He was climbing the oak tree in our backyard, Hunter explained, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. I was inside taking a business call when I heard him scream. The doctor nodded, but Hunter caught something odd in his expression, a flicker of recognition when Sabrina Allen walked through the automatic doors. His wife moved with her usual calculated grace, designer heels clicking against the hospital floor, her expression one of practiced concern. How is he? Sabrina asked, her voice carrying just the right amount of maternal worry. But Hunter had spent 15 years married to this woman, and something felt wrong. Her timing was too perfect, her demeanor too controlled. Dr. Houston's reaction was immediate and unsettling. The color drained from his face as his eyes locked onto Sabrina. Without breaking eye contact, he whispered something to the nurse beside him. Hunter caught only fragments. "Get security. It's her." "I'm sorry, what's the problem?" Hunter stepped forward, his protective instincts flaring. Dr. Houston quickly composed himself, but the damage was done. "Nothing, Mr. Allen. Just standard protocol. Let's focus on Charlie." As a medical team worked on his son's fractured arm, Hunter's mind raced. The doctor knew his wife. The question was how, and why that knowledge had triggered such an alarmed response. Sabrina remained by Charlie's bedside, playing the perfect mother, but Hunter noticed details he'd previously overlooked. The way she checked her phone obsessively. How she'd arrived at the hospital 20 minutes after he'd called her, despite claiming she was only 10 minutes away at the grocery store. Most disturbing was her reaction when Charlie had first fallen. That strange laugh she'd made, quickly covered by concern. "Daddy, my arm hurts," Charlie whimpered. "I know, buddy. The doctors are going to fix you up." Hunter squeezed his son's good hand, but his eyes remained on Sabrina. After Charlie was sedated and taken for x-rays, Hunter cornered Dr. Houston in the hallway. "I need to know why you reacted that way to my wife." The doctor hesitated, clearly wrestling with professional ethics and personal conviction. "Mr. Allen, I can't discuss other patients, but be careful. Some people aren't who they seem." "What does that mean?" "Just watch your son closely, and maybe ask yourself how someone falls from a tree that way. That kind of break usually requires significant force or a very specific angle of impact." Hunter's blood ran cold. "Are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything officially, but off the record, I've seen injuries like this before. They don't typically come from simple falls." 3 hours later, Charlie was released with a cast and pain medication. The drive home was silent except for his son's occasional whimpers. Hunter's mind churned with dark possibilities he'd never allowed himself to consider. Back at their sprawling suburban home, Hunter helped Charlie into bed while Sabrina disappeared into her study, claiming she had urgent emails to handle. Through the baby monitor, Hunter heard Charlie mumbling in his medicated haze. "Mommy pushed. The tree was too high. She said Daddy wouldn't know." Hunter's hands clenched into fists. He sat in the darkness of Charlie's room long after his son fell asleep, staring at the innocent face of the child he'd killed to protect. For the first time in their marriage, Hunter allowed himself to truly see his wife not as the woman he'd fallen in love with, but as a stranger whose actions no longer made sense. The pieces were there, the unexplained absences, the phone calls that ended when he entered rooms, the gradual emotional distance. But this was different. If Sabrina had hurt Charlie, if she was capable of harming their child, then everything he thought he knew about his life was a lie. Hunter Allen had built his reputation on being methodical, thorough, and above all, unforgiving to those who crossed him. Construction was a ruthless business, and he'd crushed competitors and dealt with betrayers with cold efficiency. But this was personal. This was his family. As he finally left Charlie's room, Hunter caught sight of Sabrina through her study doorway. She was on the phone, speaking in hushed tones, her back to the door. He moved closer, staying in the shadows. No, it was risky, but he was getting suspicious anyway. The hospital thing was just bad luck? No, Hunter doesn't suspect anything yet. Hunter retreated to his own study, his mind already shifting into the calculating mode that had made him successful. Tomorrow, he would begin investigating the woman he'd shared his bed with for 15 years. And if what he suspected was true, Sabrina Allen would learn why crossing Hunter Allen was the biggest mistake of her life. Chapter 2. The Investigation. Hunter Allen owned a construction empire worth $20 million because he understood the value of information and patience. Over the next 2 weeks, while caring for Charlie and maintaining the facade of normalcy, he quietly dismantled his wife's life piece by piece. His first call was to Luke Hammond, a private investigator who'd helped him with corporate espionage and background checks on potential business partners. Luke was ex-military, discreet, and had zero tolerance for people who hurt children. "I need everything on my wife," Hunter said during their meeting at a construction site downtown. "And I mean everything. Financial records, phone logs, medical history, where she goes when she's not home. Luke studied his old friend's face. "Hunter, are you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes ignorance is." "She hurt my son." The words came out flat, emotionless, but Luke caught the volcanic rage beneath the surface. "Understood. Give me 72 hours. While Luke worked his magic, Hunter conducted his own investigation. He installed tracking software on Sabrina's phone and car, hidden cameras throughout the house, and began monitoring her activities with the precision of a military operation. The first revelation came within days. Sabrina's grocery shopping trips were visits to a downtown apartment complex. Her spa days were lengthy afternoons at the same location. The expensive work dinners with her marketing firm colleagues were elaborate lies. She quit that job 6 months ago. Hunter sat in his truck outside the apartment building on a Wednesday afternoon, watching his wife enter Unit 4B. Through Luke's preliminary report, he already knew the apartment belonged to Elliot Porter, a 32-year-old personal trainer with a criminal record including assault and drug possession. What Hunter discovered next nearly broke his legendary self-control. Luke's full report arrived via encrypted email, and Hunter read it in his locked study while Sabrina played with Charlie in the living room, maintaining her motherly charade. Subject: Sabrina Douglas Allen. Comprehensive background report. "Mr. Allen, you need to sit down for this. Your wife isn't who you think she is. Real name, Sabrina Douglas. Born in Nevada. Married twice before you. Both husbands died under suspicious circumstances. First husband, Timothy Douglas, died in a hunting accident when she was 23. She inherited his $800,000 life insurance policy. Second husband, Marcus Woods, died in a car crash 2 years later. Another $1.2 million payout. She moved to your city 5 years before meeting you and created an entirely new identity. The marketing job, the college degree, even her medical history, all fabricated. More concerning, Dr. Kevin Houston recognized her because she brought another child to that same ER 3 years ago, a little girl with suspicious injuries. The child died 2 days later from complications. The case was never prosecuted due to lack of evidence, but Houston never forgot her face. Current situation: she's been living a double life for at least 8 months with Elliot Porter. Porter has connections to unsavory people, including individuals who specialize in making problems disappear permanently. Final note: I found evidence she's been slowly poisoning you with small doses of antifreeze in your coffee. The symptoms would mimic heart disease. Your life insurance policy is worth $3.5 million. I'm attaching all documentation. Call me immediately. Luke. Hunter's hand shook as he scrolled through bank records showing Sabrina's secret accounts, photographs of her with Elliot Porter, and medical records indicating the gradual buildup of toxins in his system, toxins that would eventually kill him and look like natural causes. The woman in his living room, the one Charlie called Mommy, was a calculating serial killer who'd murdered her previous husbands and was slowly working on him. Worse, she'd already started targeting Charlie, probably because a 4-year-old witness was becoming inconvenient. Hunter's phone buzzed with a text from Sabrina. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. Kiss Charlie for me." Through his security cameras, he watched her leave 20 minutes later, designer purse in hand, completely unaware that her husband now knew everything. Hunter poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in his study, staring at surveillance photos of his wife kissing another man, a man who helped her plan murders. For most people, discovering such a betrayal would be devastating. For Hunter Allen, it was clarifying. He'd built his fortune by being 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Competitors who tried to undercut his bids found their equipment mysteriously breaking down. Business partners who attempted to cheat him discovered their other ventures suddenly facing regulatory scrutiny. Workers who stole from his sites were blacklisted industry-wide within days. Hunter Allen didn't just win. He crushed those who opposed him so thoroughly they served as warnings to others. Sabrina had made 3 critical errors. First, she'd underestimated her target. Second, she'd hurt his child. Third, she'd assumed Hunter was just another mark to be manipulated and murdered. She was about to learn why that assumption would cost her everything. Hunter opened his laptop and began typing. By morning, he'd have a comprehensive plan that would destroy both Sabrina and Elliot Porter in ways they couldn't imagine. But first, he had a phone call to make. Luke, it's Hunter. I need you to expand the operation. We're not just gathering information anymore. We're going to war. Chapter 3. The Setup. Hunter Allen had always believed in the principle of overwhelming force. When a competitor tried to steal his clients, he didn't just outbid them. He bought their suppliers, hired their best workers, and crushed their ability to operate. When dealing with a serial killer masquerading as his wife, the same philosophy applied. 3 weeks after discovering Sabrina's true nature, Hunter had assembled what he privately called his board of war. The meeting took place in the basement of his construction company's headquarters, a soundproof room originally designed for confidential client meetings. Luke Hammond sat across from Hunter, files spread across the table like battle plans. Beside him was Annie Garcia, a forensic accountant who specialized in untangling complex financial crimes. At the far end sat Johnny Hall, a former Marine who now ran security consulting for Hunter's more sensitive projects. Status report. Hunter said, his voice carrying the authority that had built an empire. Luke consulted his notes. Sabrina and Elliot are escalating. We intercepted communications suggesting they're planning to accelerate your timeline. The poisoning was supposed to take months, but they're getting impatient. Meaning, they're discussing more direct action. Elliot mentioned a staged home invasion for this weekend while you're supposedly at the construction site in Millfield. Hunter nodded. He'd expected this. Sabrina knew he always worked Saturday mornings on major projects, and their home security system had convenient blind spots she'd probably mapped for Elliot. Annie Garcia opened her laptop. I've traced Sabrina's financial network. She's got accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Panama. Total liquid assets around $4 million, all from her previous husband's life insurance policies. But here's the interesting part. Elliot Porter isn't just her lover. He's her business partner. Explain. They've done this before with other couples. Elliot identifies wealthy, isolated targets. Sabrina gets close to them, marries them, and they execute the plan. They've been operating for at least 7 years. I found connections to at least 6 suspicious deaths across 3 states. Johnny Hall leaned forward. What about the authorities? That's where it gets complicated, Luke interjected. Elliot's brother is Detective Zachary Jackson with the state police. Family loyalty runs deep, and Zachary's been protecting Elliot for years. Any official investigation would tip them off. Hunter absorbed this information without visible reaction. He'd suspected the corruption went deeper than simple murder for insurance schemes. What about the child who died at the hospital? Charlotte Fowler, age 6. Sabrina was dating the girl's father, Marcus Fowler. The child died from what appeared to be complications from a fall, but Dr. Houston suspected abuse. Before he could push for a formal investigation, the father died in a car accident and Sabrina disappeared. Let me guess, another life insurance payout. $2.3 million. Hunter stood and walked to the window overlooking his construction yard. Dozens of workers moved with purposeful efficiency, building something permanent and strong. It reminded him why he'd always succeeded where others failed. He thought in terms of foundations and long-term stability. Here's what's going to happen, he said, turning back to his team. We're not just going to stop them. We're going to destroy them so completely that it serves as a message to anyone else who might think Hunter Allen is an easy target. He moved to a whiteboard and began sketching. Phase 1. We let them think their plan is working. Sabrina believes she's been slowly poisoning me and that Elliot will stage a home invasion this weekend. Instead, we're going to give them exactly what they want, with modifications. Luke raised an eyebrow. You want to let them try to kill you? I want them to think they've succeeded. Annie, I need you to create a paper trail showing I've been experiencing heart problems. Doctor visits, prescriptions, the works. Make it look like the poisoning is working faster than expected. What about Charlie? Johnny asked. Hunter's expression hardened. Charlie will be safely away. My sister Trinity McCarty is taking him to Disney World this weekend. As far as anyone knows, it's a surprise trip I arranged because I've been feeling guilty about working too much. And Sabrina? Sabrina thinks she's attending her college roommate's wedding in Chicago this weekend. She'll have perfect alibis for when things go wrong for me at home. Annie looked confused. I don't understand the endgame. Hunter smiled, and for the first time since discovering his wife's true nature, it was genuine. Elliot Porter is going to break into my house to stage my death. Instead, he's going to find himself in a very different situation. By Sunday morning, both Elliot and Detective Zachary Jackson will be facing choices that will destroy them. What about Sabrina? Sabrina is going to learn that her new widow's inheritance isn't quite what she expected. In fact, she's going to find herself in a position where she'll beg me to take her back. And that's when she'll discover what I do to people who hurt my son. Luke leaned back in his chair. Hunter, whatever you're planning, make sure you can live with it afterward. Hunter thought about Charlie's broken arm, about the toxins in his bloodstream, about the child who died because no one stopped Sabrina in time. I can live with anything except letting them hurt more people. We start tomorrow. As his team filed out, Hunter remained in the basement, finalizing details that would ensure Elliot Porter's weekend home invasion became something far more memorable than murder. By the time he was finished planning, Hunter realized he was actually looking forward to Saturday night. Chapter 4. The Bait. Friday morning arrived with typical suburban normalcy. Hunter made breakfast while Sabrina fussed over Charlie's cast, playing the caring mother with Academy Award-worthy performance. Charlie, oblivious to the undercurrents, chattered excitedly about his upcoming trip with Aunt Trinity. I still think it's excessive, letting him fly across the country just for a theme park, Sabrina said. Buttering toast with movements a shade too precise. He's been through trauma, Hunter replied, watching her through the reflection in the kitchen window. A little distraction will help him heal. What Sabrina didn't know was that Trinity McCarty was already in town, staying at a hotel under an assumed name. Charlie would be safely away by noon, but his departure would look spontaneous to anyone watching. Hunter's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Kevin Houston. Lab results ready. Recommend immediate consultation. The text was part of the performance, but Sabrina's reaction was real, a flash of satisfaction quickly hidden behind concern. Is everything okay? You seem tired lately. Probably just stress from the Millfield project. I'll see the doctor next week. Another text, this one from Luke, package delivered. The package was Elliot Porter's weekend assignment. Through carefully planted information, Elliot now believed Hunter would be alone Saturday night, working late at the construction site, and that the house's security system would be down for routine maintenance. What Elliot didn't know was that Hunter would be very much at home, waiting. I need to run errands, Sabrina announced after breakfast. Pick up my dress from the dry cleaner. Get a pedicure before the wedding. Hunter kissed her cheek, tasting lies. Drive safely. I love you. Love you too. As Sabrina's Mercedes pulled out of the driveway, Hunter's real day began. He called Trinity, who arrived within minutes, to collect Charlie. The boy was thrilled to see his aunt and completely bought the story about a surprise vacation. Take care of Daddy while I'm gone, Charlie told Sabrina when she returned from her errands that afternoon. I will, sweetheart. The irony was so perfect Hunter almost laughed. That evening, as Sabrina packed for her fictional wedding, Hunter made his final preparations. Hidden cameras were positioned throughout the house. Johnny Hall was stationed in the neighbor's house. The Parson family was conveniently out of town, and their security system had mysteriously malfunctioned, allowing Johnny access. Test the comms. Hunter spoke into his nearly invisible earpiece. Clear as day, Johnny's voice responded. Elliot drove by twice in the last hour. He's definitely planning something. And Detective Jackson parked 3 blocks away in an unmarked car. He's running interference if anything goes wrong. Hunter smiled grimly. Both men thought they were hunting a lone victim. They had no idea they'd wandered into a predator's territory. At 8 p.m., Sabrina kissed him goodbye with the same lips that had probably kissed her previous husbands before their deaths. I'll call when I land. Have fun at the wedding. The house felt different after she left. Not empty, but pregnant with possibility. Hunter changed into dark clothing and reviewed his preparations one final time. In the basement, Johnny Hall's military expertise had helped create what looked like a home gym, but was actually a specialized interrogation facility. Soundproof walls, restraints that appeared to be exercise equipment, and cameras positioned to capture everything. At 10 p.m., Hunter received the expected call from Sabrina. Airport noise in the background, perfectly staged. Just boarding now. The flight's delayed, so I won't land until after midnight. Safe travels. Love you. At 11:47 p.m., motion sensors detected Elliot Porter approaching the house through the backyard. Hunter watched through hidden cameras as the younger man examined the security system, finding exactly the vulnerabilities he expected to find. Elliot was good. Hunter had to admit that. He moved through the darkened house like a professional, avoiding creaky floorboards and staying in the shadows. He'd obviously studied the layout extensively. What Elliot couldn't have known was that Hunter had studied him just as thoroughly. He's in the kitchen. Johnny's voice whispered through the earpiece, moving toward the stairs. Let him come to me. Hunter lay in his bed, breathing slowly and regularly, playing the part of a sleeping target. Through barely opened eyes, he watched Elliot Porter enter his bedroom, a syringe in his hand. Elliot moved with predatory confidence, approaching the bed where Hunter apparently slept deeply. The syringe was probably loaded with enough poison to kill a horse, Sabrina's new method for when patience ran out. Elliot raised the syringe. Hunter's hand shot out like a striking snake, crushing Elliot's wrist. The younger man's cry of pain was cut short by Hunter's other hand clamping over his mouth. Hello, Elliot. We need to talk. Elliot's eyes went wide with shock and terror as Hunter's grip tightened. The syringe fell to the floor as Elliot realized his perfect victim had become his worst nightmare. Not if you understand, Hunter whispered. Elliot nodded frantically. Good, because we're going downstairs, and you're going to tell me everything about you and my wife. And Elliot, if you try to run, if you try to fight, if you even think about calling for help, I'll make sure you live just long enough to regret it. Chapter 5, The Confession. In the basement of Hunter Allen's house, Elliot Porter learned the difference between being a predator and being prey. Hunter had zip-tied Elliot's hands to a weight bench with restraints that looked like standard gym equipment, but were designed for much darker purposes. A few feet away, hidden cameras captured every word and expression. Let's start simple, Hunter said, settling into a chair across from his captive. How many people have you and Sabrina killed? Elliot's face was swollen from Hunter's initial restraint, his broken wrist cradled awkwardly, but his eyes still held defiance. I don't know what you're talking about. Hunter nodded to Johnny Hall, who stepped from the shadows holding Elliot's cell phone. We intercepted your communications. We know about the insurance payouts, the previous husbands, the children who got in the way. You can't prove anything. I don't need to prove anything in court, Elliot. This isn't about justice. It's about information. Hunter stood and walked to a tool rack along the basement wall. Construction work had familiarized him with implements designed to apply precisely controlled pressure to various materials. You see, I learned something interesting about you. Your brother, Detective Zachary Jackson, has been covering your tracks for years. Family loyalty is admirable, but makes you both vulnerable. Elliot's confidence began to crack. What do you want? Everything. Names, dates, methods, bank accounts. How you target victims, how you eliminate witnesses, how long you've been operating. And if I don't tell you, Hunter selected a heavy-duty bolt cutter from the rack. Then I start removing pieces until you do, beginning with fingers, moving to toes, then more essential parts. The color drained from Elliot's face. You're insane. No, Elliot. I'm practical. You and Sabrina hurt my son. You've been slowly poisoning me for months. You killed at least 6 other people, including a child. Insanity would be letting you live after this conversation. Hunter's matter-of-fact tone was more terrifying than any shouting. Elliot began to understand he wasn't dealing with a typical victim. Zachary will come looking for me. Your brother is sitting in his car 3 blocks away, waiting for your all-clear signal. But he's not going to get one. Hunter showed Elliot his own phone, displaying a text message ready to send. All done. Target eliminated. Heading home. 1 button press, and Zachary thinks you're safe at home. By the time he realizes something's wrong, this conversation will be over. Elliot stared at the message, realizing the completeness of his situation. What do you want to know? Everything. Start with Charlotte Fowler. For the next 2 hours, Elliot Porter confessed to a killing spree that spanned 7 years and 3 states. He detailed how he identified wealthy, isolated targets through gym memberships and social media. How Sabrina infiltrated their lives, playing the perfect girlfriend or wife. How they eliminated obstacles, previous wives, suspicious relatives, and children who witnessed too much. Charlotte Fowler had been killed because she'd seen Sabrina put something in her father's drink. Timothy Douglas had been shot during a stage hunting accident when he discovered Sabrina's previous marriage. Marcus Woods had been drugged and his car sent off a mountain road. The toxins in your coffee were just the beginning, Elliot explained, his voice hollow with resignation. Sabrina wanted it to look natural, but you were taking too long to die. This weekend was supposed to be a heart attack brought on by a home invasion gone wrong. What about Charlie? Elliot hesitated, then spoke quietly. Kids are problems. They see things, ask questions. Sabrina said he was getting suspicious about the fall from a tree. Hunter felt a rage, so pure it was almost meditative. The fall wasn't an accident. She pushed him. Not hard enough to kill him, just enough to make him afraid to tell you things. But when the doctor recognized her at the hospital, she knew Charlie would have to be dealt with eventually. Ow! Accidents happen to kids all the time. Drowning, falls, car crashes. We've done it before. Hunter pressed send on the text message to Detective Jackson, then set down Elliot's phone. Thank you for being so thorough. What happens now? Now you're going to call Sabrina and tell her there's been a complication. Hunter untied Elliot's good hand and handed him his phone. You're going to say the job went wrong, that I woke up and fought back, that you had to kill me messier than planned. Tell her she needs to come home immediately to help with cleanup before the police get involved. She'll never believe. She'll believe it because greed makes people stupid. Sabrina thinks she's about to inherit $3.5 million. She's not going to let a minor complication stop her. Elliot dialed with shaking fingers. Hunter listened as his wife received news of his apparent death with barely concealed excitement masked as shock and grief. I'll catch the first flight home, Sabrina said. Clean up everything. I'll be there by morning. After the call ended, Hunter looked at Elliot with something approaching pity. You know what's funny? You and Sabrina thought you were so smart, so careful, but you never considered that your victims might be smarter. What do you mean? Elliot, did you really think I'd make it this easy to rob and murder me? I've been 3 steps ahead of you since the day I found out what you were. Hunter walked to a cabinet and removed a small video camera. Every confession you just made is recorded. Every murder, every method, every victim. And in about 6 hours, when Sabrina walks into this house expecting to find my corpse, she's going to find something very different. Elliot's remaining defiance crumbled completely. Please. Please what? Please show mercy to serial killers who target children. Hunter checked his watch. Johnny's going to keep you company while I prepare for my wife's homecoming. Don't worry, Elliot. Your suffering is almost over. As Hunter climbed the basement stairs, Elliot Porter began to truly understand what it meant to be trapped by someone who played the game better than he did. Chapter 6. The Reckoning Begins. Saturday morning's dawn found Hunter Allen in his kitchen, brewing coffee with the same methodical precision he applied to everything. Upstairs, the bed remained unmade, stained with what appeared to be blood, but was actually theatrical makeup mixed with corn syrup. To anyone entering the house, it would look like a violent struggle had occurred. At 6:23 a.m., Sabrina's key turned in the front door. Hunter watched through hidden cameras as his wife entered their home, her designer luggage abandoned on the porch. She moved quickly through the house, calling Elliot's name in urgent whispers. Elliot, where are you? She found the bedroom first, gasping with apparent shock at the scene of carnage. Blood on the sheets, furniture overturned, her husband apparently dead and gone. Hunter had to admire her performance. The tears seemed genuine. Oh God, Elliot, what happened here? Sabrina pulled out her phone and dialed. Hunter heard Elliot's phone ringing in the basement, where the man himself sat zip-tied and contemplating his mortality. Elliot, pick up. The police will be here soon. We need to get our story straight. She searched the house systematically, growing more agitated with each empty room. Finally, she discovered the basement door, which Hunter had left conspicuously ajar. Elliot, as Sabrina descended into the basement, Hunter stepped out from his hiding place in the laundry room. "Hello, darling. Looking for someone?" Sabrina spun around, her face cycling through shock, terror, and calculating fury in rapid succession. "Hunter? But you're the blood upstairs. Corn syrup and food coloring. Very effective, don't you think?" She looked past him to Elliot, who sat restrained and broken on the weight bench. "What have you done?" "What have I done?" Hunter's voice remained conversational, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Sabrina, I've learned some fascinating things about my wife. For instance, did you know your real name is Sabrina Douglas? Or that you've been married twice before to men who died under suspicious circumstances?" Sabrina's expression hardened into something ugly and familiar. "I don't know what you're talking about. I also learned about Charlotte Fowler, the 6-year-old girl who died because she witnessed you poisoning her father." Elliot was very informative about that particular murder. "Elliot, you idiot," she hissed. "Don't blame Elliot. He held out for almost 20 minutes before telling me everything, including how you've been slowly poisoning me for months and planning to murder our son because he was becoming inconvenient." For the first time, genuine fear flickered across Sabrina's face. "Where's Charlie?" "Safe. Far away from his murdering mother." Sabrina straightened, and Hunter saw the real woman beneath the facade, cold, calculating, and utterly without remorse. "Fine. You know, what do you want? Money? I have accounts. I want justice." "Justice?" Sabrina laughed bitterly. "From a man who built his fortune crushing anyone who got in his way? Don't pretend you're better than me. Hunter, you're just angry you got outplayed." "Actually, I wasn't outplayed. Watch." Hunter activated a wall-mounted monitor that began playing Elliot's recorded confession. Sabrina's face went pale as she heard her partner detailing their murder spree in graphic detail. This recording, along with all supporting evidence, is currently in the possession of FBI Special Agent Malia Thomas. Agent Thomas specializes in interstate murder conspiracies and has been very interested in your activities. "You're lying. I'm practical. Did you really think I'd handle this alone?" Elliot's confession implicates Detective Zachary Jackson in obstruction of justice and accessory to murder charges. "Your brother-in-law is probably being arrested as we speak." As if summoned by his words, Hunter's phone rang. He answered on speaker. "Mr. Allen? This is Agent Thomas. We have Detective Jackson in custody. He's already started talking about his brother's activities in exchange for a reduced sentence." Sabrina stared at the phone in horror. "Zachary would never." "Zachary has a wife and 2 young children," Agent Thomas continued. "When faced with life in prison versus cooperation, family loyalty became relative." Hunter ended the call and looked at his wife with something approaching satisfaction. "Elliot, Detective Jackson, and you are all going to prison. The evidence is overwhelming, and now that Jackson's cooperating, prosecutors won't need to rely solely on Elliot's confession." "This is impossible. You can't have planned all this." "Sabrina, I've been planning this since the day I found out what you were. Every move you've made, every decision Elliot and Jackson made, has been guided by information I wanted you to have." Hunter moved closer, and Sabrina instinctively backed away. "You see, I learned something important about you and Elliot. You're not as smart as you think you are. Smart killers don't operate in the same geographical area for 7 years. Smart killers don't keep detailed records of their crimes. And smart killers certainly don't trust family members with corrupt cops to keep them safe. What do you want from me?" "Nothing. You're finished, Sabrina. But before the FBI takes you away, I want you to understand something." Hunter's voice became deadly quiet. "You hurt my son. You tried to kill me. You murdered at least 6 people, including a child. There is nothing you could offer me that would make me show you mercy. Hunter, please. The only question now is whether you cooperate with authorities and spend life in prison, or whether you fight the charges and risk the death penalty." Sabrina looked around desperately, seeing no escape, no angle to work, no way to manipulate her way out of the trap that had closed around her. How long have you known? Since the night Charlie broke his arm. Dr. Houston remembered you from when Charlotte Fowler died. And you've been planning this since then? I've been planning your destruction since then. And Sabrina? This is just the beginning. Chapter 7. The Unraveling. The federal courthouse in downtown Los Angeles had seen many high-profile cases, but the trial of Sabrina Douglas Allen drew particular attention. Serial killers who targeted their own families struck a primal fear in the American psyche, and the media circus was relentless. Hunter Allen sat in the front row of the gallery, watching his wife of 15 years face a jury of her peers. 6 months had passed since her arrest, and the federal prosecution had built an airtight case using Elliott's confession, Detective Jackson's cooperation, and the mountain of evidence Hunter's team had gathered. Sabrina looked different now. The designer clothes and perfect makeup had been replaced by an orange jumpsuit and institutional pallor. Her attorney, a public defender named Nicole Hill, was competent but outmatched by the federal prosecution team. Mr. Allen, the prosecutor called. Please tell the court about the night of June 15th, when you discovered the defendant's true plans. Hunter took the witness stand with calm confidence. Over 3 days of testimony, he methodically destroyed any remaining sympathy the jury might have had for Sabrina. He described finding Charlie with his broken arm, Dr. Houston's warning, the months of investigation that revealed his wife's true nature. When the prosecutor displayed enlarged photographs of the crime scenes from Sabrina's previous victims, several jurors visibly recoiled. The image of Charlotte Fowler's hospital bed was particularly damaging. And what did you do when you learned your wife had been poisoning you? The prosecutor asked. I protected my son and gathered evidence to ensure she could never hurt anyone else. Some might say you took the law into your own hands. I followed the law exactly. Every piece of evidence was gathered legally. Every recording was made on my own property with proper consent. I simply refused to be a victim. During cross-examination, Nicole Hill tried to paint Hunter as a vindictive husband who'd entrapped his wife. Isn't it true, Mr. Allen, that you deliberately manipulated events to frame my client? I manipulated events to reveal her true nature. There's a difference. You created an elaborate deception. I created an opportunity for your client to demonstrate her murderous intent. She chose to take it. But if you hadn't set this trap, Ms. Hill, your client had already killed at least 6 people before she met me. I didn't create a killer. I simply exposed one. The defense's case collapsed under the weight of evidence. Elliott Porter had pled guilty in exchange for life without parole and testified extensively about their murder partnership. Detective Zachary Jackson, facing corruption charges, provided detailed information about how he'd protected his brother's activities. But it was Sabrina herself who delivered the most damaging testimony. Against her attorney's advice, she took the stand on the trial's final day, apparently believing she could charm the jury as she'd charmed her previous victims. I never intended for anyone to get hurt, she began, her voice carefully modulated to project vulnerability. The prosecutor smiled. Ms. Allen, you stated you never intended anyone to get hurt. How do you explain this recorded conversation with Elliott Porter, dated 3 weeks before your arrest? The courtroom speakers played Sabrina's voice. The kid is becoming a problem. We need to deal with him before he tells Hunter something that makes him suspicious. I was referring to sending Charlie away to boarding school. In this conversation from 2 days later, kids have accidents all the time. Pool drownings, falls downstairs. It would look completely natural. Sabrina's facade cracked as the prosecutor played recording after recording of her discussing murder with cold calculation. Her attempts to explain away the evidence only made her appear more manipulative. Ms. Allen, in your expert opinion, how many children need to die to protect a murder conspiracy? That's not what I meant. How many husbands is it acceptable to poison for insurance money? You're twisting my words. Did you or did you not push your 4-year-old stepson, Charlie Allen, from a tree to intimidate him? Aye, he fell. Children fall. Yes or no, Ms. Allen? Did you push Charlie Allen? For 10 seconds, the courtroom was silent. Then Sabrina's mask slipped completely, revealing the cold predator beneath. He was going to ruin everything. The jury's collective intake of breath was audible. Sabrina realized her mistake immediately, but the damage was done. Hunter watched his wife's complete psychological collapse with satisfaction. This was what happened when predators faced actual consequences for their actions. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sabrina screamed as the verdict was read. Her composure finally shattered completely. This isn't fair. Hunter set me up. He manipulated everything. Judge Luke Hammond, coincidentally sharing a name with Hunter's private investigator, called for order. Ms. Allen, you will have an opportunity to address the court at sentencing. As bailiffs led Sabrina away, she caught Hunter's eye across the courtroom. The look she gave him was pure hatred, but also recognition. She finally understood that she'd never been hunting Hunter Allen. He'd been hunting her. After the trial, Hunter stood on the courthouse steps, surrounded by reporters. Mr. Allen, how does it feel to see your wife convicted? I feel justice has been served for Charlotte Fowler, Timothy Douglas, Marcus Woods, and all the other victims. What's next for you and your son? We're moving forward. Charlie's young enough to heal from this trauma, and we have excellent support systems. Do you harbor any resentment toward your wife? Hunter considered the question carefully. Resentment implies ongoing emotion towards someone who no longer matters. Sabrina Douglas Allen is a problem that's been solved. That evening, Hunter returned to his house, which he'd already put on the market. Too many bad memories, too much contamination from Sabrina's presence. He and Charlie would start fresh in a new city, far from the scene of their trauma. In his study, Hunter reviewed the final reports from his team. Elliot Porter would die in prison. Detective Jackson faced 10 years for corruption. Sabrina would likely receive the death penalty, though appeals would drag on for years. More importantly, the investigation had identified 3 other potential victims Sabrina and Elliot had been monitoring. Those people had been quietly warned and were now safely aware of the danger they'd unknowingly faced. Hunter Allen had built his fortune by being thorough, patient, and utterly ruthless with those who crossed him. In the case of his wife's betrayal, those qualities had served justice. Charlie bounded into the study, his cast finally removed, his arm fully healed. Daddy, when do we see the new house? Tomorrow, buddy. Are you excited? Yeah, we'll have a big tree to climb. Hunter smiled, remembering simpler times when his biggest worry was whether his son would scrape his knee playing outside. The biggest tree you've ever seen. But we'll build a proper tree house this time, with safety railings and everything. Can Aunt Trinity help? Of course. Family takes care of family. As Charlie ran off to play, Hunter reflected on the lessons of the past year. Trust was precious and easily shattered. Family, real family, was worth protecting at any cost. And some betrayals were so fundamental they could never be forgiven. But he'd learned something else. Sometimes the best revenge was simply ensuring that justice was served completely and publicly. Sabrina Douglas Allen had spent years believing she was smarter than everyone around her. She died believing she could manipulate and murder without consequences. She'd been wrong on both counts. Chapter 8, Retribution. The federal penitentiary in Victorville, California, was not designed for comfort. Sabrina Douglas Allen had spent 8 months in administrative segregation, awaiting the conclusion of her appeals process. Her death sentence had been upheld at every level, and her execution date was now 6 weeks away. Hunter Allen made the drive from his new home in San Diego on a gray Tuesday morning in February. The visiting room was sterile and heavily monitored, designed to prevent any contraband exchange or unauthorized communication. Sabrina looked older than her 42 years. Prison had stripped away the last vestiges of the beautiful, charming woman who'd once seduced wealthy men to their deaths. Her hair had grown gray, her skin pale and lined with stress. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said, settling into the plastic chair across from him. "I wanted to see you one last time. To gloat. To close the book." Sabrina studied his face, looking for some crack in his composure, some angle she could still work. "Charlie doesn't visit. Charlie doesn't know you exist. As far as he's concerned, his mother died in a car accident 2 years ago. He's been in therapy, but he's healing. You erased me from his life. I protected him from you. There's a difference. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of their shared history and mutual destruction heavy between them. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd never found out? Sabrina asked. No. You would have killed me and eventually killed Charlie. Then you would have moved on to your next victim. Maybe. Or maybe I would have been content with you. Hunter shook his head. People like you don't get content, Sabrina. You get bored. And bored serial killers are dangerous serial killers. People like me? Predators. You enjoyed the hunt, the manipulation, the kill. The money was just a bonus. Sabrina's mask slipped slightly, revealing a flash of the cold intelligence beneath. You enjoyed destroying me just as much. Yes, I did. His honesty seemed to surprise her. At least you're honest about it. I've never pretended to be a good man, Sabrina. I'm just a better predator than you were. Is that supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to explain why you lost. Hunter leaned forward slightly. You want to know the difference between us? You killed innocent people for money. I destroyed a serial killer to protect innocent people. You targeted the vulnerable. I targeted the guilty. You still destroyed a family. Your own family. You destroyed our family the moment you decided to hurt Charlie. Everything that followed was consequence. Sabrina's composure finally cracked. I loved you. In my own way, I did love you. No, you didn't. You loved what I represented. Security, wealth, respectability. You saw me as a problem to be solved, not a person to be loved. And now you're a problem that's been solved. The guard called time, and Hunter stood to leave. Hunter, Sabrina called. When they execute me, will you be there? He considered the question seriously. No, you don't deserve that much of my attention. What will you tell Charlie about me when he's older? The truth, that his biological mother was sick, and that sickness made her dangerous to people she should have protected. And about you? Will you tell him what you're capable of? Hunter paused at the door. Charlie will learn that some people in this world hurt others for pleasure or profit. And he'll learn that those people can be stopped by someone willing to pay the necessary price. What if he becomes like you? Then God help anyone who threatens his family. Hunter left the prison without looking back. 3 hours later, he was home in time to pick Charlie up from school. How was your day, buddy? Good. We're studying butterflies in science class. Did you know they start as caterpillars and completely change into something different? I didn't know that. It's called metamorphosis. Metamorphosis, Charlie repeated carefully. Can people do that too? Change into something completely different. Hunter thought about his wife, who'd changed from apparent innocence to revealed monstrosity. About Elliot Porter, who'd transformed from predator to broken victim. About himself, who'd evolved from trusting husband to calculating hunter. Sometimes Charlie, but usually people just become more of what they already were inside. What are you inside, Daddy? Hunter looked at his son, healthy, happy, safe, and completely unaware of the violence that had been necessary to preserve his innocence. I'm someone who protects the people I love. 6 weeks later, Sabrina Douglas Allen was executed by lethal injection at 12:01 a.m. Hunter was not present. He was at home, reading Charlie a bedtime story about a brave knight who defeated a dragon to save his kingdom. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 2 years after Sabrina's execution, Hunter Allen stood on the deck of his new home overlooking Mission Bay in San Diego. The house was smaller than their previous home, but felt larger somehow, uncontaminated by memories of betrayal and violence. Charlie, now 8 years old, was in the backyard with his new stepmother, Trinity McCarty Allen. Hunter had married his sister-in-law 18 months after Sabrina's death, as much for practical reasons as emotional ones. Charlie needed a mother figure, Trinity needed stability after her divorce, and Hunter needed someone he could trust absolutely. Their marriage was built on honesty rather than passion. Trinity knew everything about Sabrina, about the murders, about Hunter's role in bringing justice. She'd accepted it all because she understood the fundamental truth. Hunter Allen was dangerous to those who threatened his family, but utterly devoted to those who earned his loyalty. Daddy, look, Charlie called, pointing to the elaborate treehouse Hunter had built in their massive oak tree. Trinity taught me how to tie nautical knots. Show me, Hunter called back, watching his son demonstrate his new skill with the patience and precision that seemed to be inherited Allen traits. The last 2 years had been about healing and rebuilding. Charlie had no memory of Sabrina pushing him from the tree. Trauma therapy had helped process those experiences without creating permanent damage. He remembered her as someone who'd gotten sick and died, a sanitized version of the truth that protected his childhood while laying groundwork for more complete honesty when he was older. Hunter's business had expanded significantly. The notoriety from the trial had initially hurt his reputation, but the revelation that he'd helped stop a serial killer network had ultimately enhanced his standing. People wanted to work with someone who could handle extreme situations with calculated precision. More importantly, he'd found peace with his own nature. Hunter Allen was not a good man in any conventional sense. He was ruthless, unforgiving, and capable of extraordinary violence when motivated. But he was also protective, loyal, and completely devoted to justice as he understood it. His phone buzzed with a text from Luke Hammond. New client wants to meet. Husband suspects wife of infidelity. Sound familiar? Hunter smiled grimly. Luke had parlayed his role in the Sabrina case into a thriving private investigation business, specializing in domestic cases with potential criminal elements. He texted back, "Not interested in marriage counseling. This is different. Wife's previous husband died under suspicious circumstances. Client is scared." Hunter considered the request. Part of him wanted to stay retired from the hunting business to focus on being a father and husband. But another part, the part that had systematically destroyed Elliot Porter and Sabrina Douglas, stirred with interest. There were predators in the world who targeted innocent people. Serial killers who used marriage as a hunting strategy. Corrupt officials who protected murderers for money or family loyalty. And there were people like Hunter Allen who understood that sometimes the only way to stop monsters was to become something monstrous yourself. "Daddy, come up." Charlie called from the treehouse. Trinity made sandwiches. Hunter looked up at his son, healthy, happy, safe, and completely innocent of the violence that swirled around him. Charlie would grow up knowing he was protected, knowing his father would move heaven and earth to keep him safe. "Coming, buddy." Hunter climbed the ladder Trinity had insisted on installing, joining his family in their carefully constructed refuge above the dangers of the world. As they ate lunch in the treehouse, Charlie chattered about school, friends, and plans for the weekend. Trinity listened with the focused attention of someone who understood how precious these moments were. "Can we go to the beach tomorrow?" Charlie asked. "Of course," Hunter replied. "We'll make a whole day of it. Will you teach me to surf?" "When you're a little older. But I'll teach you to read the currents, to understand when water is safe and when it's dangerous." Charlie nodded seriously, absorbing the lesson that everything in life required careful assessment of risk and benefit. After lunch, as Trinity helped Charlie with homework, Hunter returned to his study and considered Luke's text. Somewhere in the city, a man was living with a woman who might be planning his death. That man was probably experiencing the same growing unease Hunter had felt in the weeks before discovering Sabrina's true nature. The difference was that this potential victim had reached out for help before it was too late. Hunter opened his laptop and typed a response to Luke, set up the meeting. "I want to hear what he has to say." Because predators never stopped hunting. They found new victims, new schemes, new ways to exploit human trust and vulnerability. And sometimes the only way to stop them was to hunt them first. Hunter Allen had learned to live with his own nature. The calculating intelligence that could build business empires, the patience that could wait years for the perfect moment, the ruthlessness that could destroy enemies completely. Most importantly, he learned to use those traits in service of something larger than himself, the protection of innocent people from those who would hurt them. In his desk drawer, Hunter kept 2 photographs.